Welcome to Build Strong Habits podcast channel. This is an audio podcast, so take your eyes off the screen, sit back, relax, and listen.
The American dream, it's this idea, this really powerful idea that draws people from all over the world to our shores.
Right.
This belief that anyone can succeed here in America if they just work hard and they're determined. It's what built our nation, it fueled our industries. It's added so much to our culture. But what happens when that dream, when it collides with the realities of immigration and border control?
Well, I think it's fascinating because it forces us to look at that tension,
Right.
That inherent tension between opportunity,
Yeah.
the promise of opportunity, and the challenge of regulating who gets to pursue that opportunity.
Exactly. And that tension is front and center right now because we have Tom Homan, this figure. He's deeply involved in U.S. immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
And now he's stepping back into a key role under President-elect Trump.
Right.
So today we're diving deep into Homan's background, his controversial past policies, and what his return could mean for immigrants seeking the American dream and for America itself.
Yeah, I think Homan's career is interesting because it spans decades.
Right.
He's worked under 6 presidents.
Wow.
So he has a really unique perspective, I think, on how immigration enforcement has changed. He was the acting director of ICE from 2017 to 2018.
Okay.
So that puts him right in the middle of shaping the Trump administration's first approach to immigration.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Uh-huh.
We know he's a veteran law enforcement officer, 3 decades under his belt. He served as acting director of ICE. And now he's been tapped for this new role of border czar
Right?
in the upcoming Trump administration. I mean, that title alone, border czar,
Yeah, no.
sounds
Well,
powerful.
It is absolutely powerful. And this position, it doesn't require Senate confirmation.
Really?
Which gives him a lot of direct authority. So think about it. He's going to be overseeing both the southern and northern borders, as well as maritime and aviation security. He's essentially the point person for everything border control.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that President-elect Trump trusts his judgment. He called him the best at policing and controlling our borders.
But best, best is subjective.
Right.
So what defines best when it comes to border control? Is it just effectiveness, efficiency, or are there other factors at play?
That's the question, right? We have to consider what metrics are being used to define best.
Yeah.
Is it the number of deportations, the strength of border security, or the perceived reduction in illegal immigration? Each metric carries its own set of implications, and it's important to understand those.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it makes Homan's return even more interesting, especially considering his past statements. Remember, he's talked about leading the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen if Trump returned to office.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some strong words.
They are strong words, and I think they signal a potential shift back to the hardline immigration policies we saw during Trump's first term. Homan was a vocal advocate for stricter enforcement back when he was acting ICE director. I mean, we saw him frequently
Yeah.
at White House press briefings defending ICE's actions and really pushing for tougher measures.
And we can't forget about the family separation policy
Yeah.
implemented under Homan's watch at ICE. Over 5,500 children were separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border in 2018.
Yeah.
It sparked a massive backlash.
Yeah.
Ultimately led to the policy's reversal.
The family separation policy is still incredibly sensitive.
Oh, absolutely.
Even years later, because it raises these really fundamental questions about the ethical and legal treatment of migrants, especially children. So it's a significant part of Homan's legacy, and I think it's something that critics will definitely bring up as he steps back into this powerful role.
Since leaving ICE in 2018, Homan hasn't exactly been quiet.
No, not at all.
I mean, he's become a media figure, joined conservative think tanks, served as a Fox News contributor, and he's associated with the Heritage Foundation.
Right.
He's even been involved with Project 2025,
Yeah.
which is this plan to reshape the federal government. That sparked a lot of debate.
It really has. That's an important point to highlight because it shows how Homan's been active. He hasn't just been reflecting on his past actions.
Right.
He's been actively trying to shape conservative thought and policy, particularly around immigration and government structure. I think his involvement with Project 2025 is really significant
Okay.
because it shows his vision for a more streamlined
Right.
and some might argue more powerful executive branch.
Here's where it gets really interesting. While Homan's been busy since leaving ICE, his views on immigration seem to have only intensified. He's talked about the need for what he calls well-targeted, planned operations,
Right.
focused on what he considers to be threats to public safety and national security. But what does well-targeted actually mean in practice?
Yeah.
And who gets to define what is a threat?
That's a critical question because it gets at the heart of potential biases and subjective interpretations of who is dangerous or undesirable. Homan's past statements about targeting sanctuary cities and increasing workplace enforcement raised some concerns about profiling and potentially discriminatory practices. And he's even hinted at restarting workplace enforcement and potentially deporting families together.
Really?
Including U.S.-born children of undocumented parents. So those are both very controversial ideas and would be a huge shift in policy.
Right. You're right. I mean, those proposals, they would undoubtedly spark fierce opposition and raise all sorts of legal and ethical challenges. It feels like we're heading toward a real clash of values here.
It is a clash of values, and it makes us ask these really tough questions, like what does the American dream mean in the 21st century? You know, is it accessible to everyone, or are there limitations based on where you were born or how you got here?
That's a really important point. We can't just talk about the American dream as this abstract concept.
Right.
We need to consider who benefits from it, who is excluded from it, and how policies impact those seeking a better life here in America.
Exactly. And we can't ignore the contributions immigrants have made.
Right.
And continue to make to the American dream. You know, they help build our nation. They enrich our culture. They drive innovation across countless fields.
Yeah. Think about the entrepreneurs, the scientists, the artists, the workers. I mean, they come here and they make their mark. They help shape the very fabric of American society. But the question now is, how will these upcoming changes in immigration policy impact those seeking the American dream today?
That's the real crux of the issue. So on the one hand, you have a president-elect who's been very clear about wanting stricter immigration controls and a focus on deportations. And he's chosen someone like Tom Homan, who is known for his hardline stance, to carry out that vision.
It seems like this is setting the stage for a potential showdown between the incoming administration's policies and those who, want a more inclusive vision of America. So how do you see this playing out?
Well, it's likely to be a really turbulent period. I think we can expect legal challenges, protests, activism from immigrant rights groups and their allies. They're going to push back against these policies, and they're going to fight for the rights of immigrants.
And what about at the state and local levels? I mean, some cities and states have declared themselves sanctuary cities and are resisting federal immigration enforcement. How do you think this dynamic will evolve?
I think we'll probably see an increase in tension between the federal government and, more progressive states and localities on these issues. This could lead to, a patchwork of different policies and approaches across the country.
So from a practical standpoint, what does that mean for someone living in a sanctuary city versus someone living in a state with stricter immigration enforcement?
It could mean a world of difference in their daily life. So in a sanctuary city, they might feel a greater sense of safety and support. Knowing that local law enforcement isn't actively cooperating with federal immigration authorities. But in a state with stricter enforcement, they could live in constant fear of being apprehended, detained, or even separated from their families.
It's a sobering thought. And it highlights the real human impact of these policy decisions. We're not just talking about abstract concepts here. We're talking about people's lives, their families, their futures.
You're right. It's a really crucial point. It's easy to get caught up in all the political back and forth. But we can't lose sight of the fact that these are real people whose lives are going to be directly affected by these policies.
And what about the economic implications of these potential changes? I mean, we've heard concerns from analysts about a potential negative impact of reduced immigration on the U.S. economy. How valid are those concerns?
They're definitely valid. Immigrants play a crucial role in our workforce.
Contributing
to a wide range of industries, from agriculture and tech to healthcare and construction. Reducing immigration could lead to labor shortages, wage stagnation, and ultimately slower economic growth.
So it seems like these proposed changes to immigration policy aren't just a matter of border security or law enforcement.
No.
But they could have ripple effects across our entire society.
Absolutely. It's about who we are as a nation, the values we uphold, and the kind of future we want to create. The decisions made in the coming months and years will have a lasting impact, not just on immigrants, but on the very fabric of our nation.
Feels like we've only scratched the surface here.
We have. It's the nature of a deep dive like this, right? It's about raising more questions than answers, prompting further exploration and getting you thinking critically about these issues.
Yeah, we started by talking about the American dream, this powerful idea that draws people to our shores.
Right.
But as we've unpacked this potential return to stricter immigration policies under Tom Homan, that dream seems to be facing a real test.
It does, and that's where this conversation gets really interesting. We have to ask ourselves, what does the American dream even mean in the face of increased enforcement and potential exclusion? Does it stay a symbol of hope, or does it become something that's only attainable for certain groups?
And that's where I think the listener comes in. This isn't just a discussion for, policymakers or pundits.
Right.
This is a conversation that we all need to be having as a nation.
Absolutely. Immigration is a complex issue with far-reaching consequences. It's not just about border security or law enforcement. It's about our values. It's about our identity and the kind of society we want to live in.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a few key takeaways. First, remember that behind every policy debate, there are real people with hopes and dreams and fears. Second, the American dream itself is going to be tested in the coming years. And finally, it's up to each of us to engage with these issues, educate ourselves, and think critically about the future of immigration and what it means for our nation.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This isn't a time for complacency. It's a time to be informed, be engaged, and be ready to participate in this crucial conversation about the future of our nation.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. I hope our listeners are walking away with a deeper understanding of the complexities of immigration, the potential impact of Tom Homan's return, and the challenges facing the American dream. Thanks for joining us today, Lee.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Build Strong Habits.